Hi, and welcome to another episode of Church Planting and Church Leadership with the Ginger Vicar. Today's episode, we're going to be looking at how to lead a church in crisis. And right now, at the time of recording, the world is gripped by a crisis that is unimaginable. A pandemic has taken place called COVID-19, and virtually there's not a place on the planet that isn't being affected by this crisis, by this epidemic. In the space of days, it seems, everything has changed around the world. These are very difficult days. This is undoubtedly one of the biggest crises that we have ever faced as a generation. Many people are saying that this is the biggest crisis that we have faced since the Second World and First World War. These are unprecedented days. Everybody's scrambling to get the latest news from the television, from the internet, trying to work out what will happen as they go forward. And in fact, for us personally, as a Christian family involved in ministry, everything has changed for us. We began 2020 by setting out as a missionary family, traveling around the world, helping people plant churches for the surf and beach world. But after just having arrived in South Africa within just a very short period of time, we found ourselves actually stranded here, unable to get back to Europe and also unable to go forward with our plan of mission. Everything has changed within a second. And maybe for you as it is for me that you are facing some very real fears currently. Now the truth is, it's not just our personal fears that we're facing, but as leaders we have an extra layer. Because we're not just responsible for ourselves and our own families, but we're responsible for all the people in our churches. We're responsible spiritually to keep them connected to God, to keep them connected to one another. We feel a sense of responsibility as they journey through life, as we see them facing potential unemployment, potential sickness, potential loss. We feel the spiritual and emotional bond with them, and we're full of empathy and desire to help them because we love them. So we carry an extra, as leaders, this extra dynamic of responsibility that's upon us as we don't just face our own problems, but also face alongside others in our church the problems that they have today and will face tomorrow. So how can you be effective in leading in crisis? Well, one of the first tips that I have for us today is, number one, to outlast the crisis. That's probably been one of the best pieces of advice that my father has ever given me. He said, Richard, understand the crisis that you're in. Take stock of it. Understand the complexity of what it is that you're facing, but set your goal on outlasting it. In every crisis that I've come up against in my life, issues in my family life, with parenting, issues with marriage, issues with finance, issues with church leadership, my father has always reminded me, Richard, understand the crisis and outlast it. Recognize that your church, that your project, that your life, more importantly, will be there the other side of this moment. But you say, how can that really be true? Because what happens if I lose my church? What happens if I lose my project? What happens if I lose my job? What happens if I'm unable to feed myself? What happens if everything falls apart? And what happens in the very worst case scenario that I lose somebody I love, or in fact, I lose my own life? How can I fixate myself on being the other side of the crisis? Well, the other side of the crisis of death is eternity with Jesus. That's the simple truth that we believe in as church leaders, that there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. So there really is nothing that can come and rob us of this connectivity, this relationship that we have with Jesus. No matter how bad things seem, no matter how bad things may get, there is nothing that can rob us of this love that Jesus has bestowed upon us. So the other side of the crisis for some of us may be eternity, but we fix ourselves upon the true and unshakable hope that is found in Jesus Christ. So we take stock of the current situation and we remember who is in charge. This is no surprise to God. He knows exactly what is taking place, and we can place our hope, our trust in Him. So take stock on what's going on in your church. Take stock of what's going on in your family life. Understand where people are at. Understand the context of what's happening in your town as well as what's happening around the globe. Make a list of priorities of things that need to be dealt with today, that can't be put off till tomorrow. And make sure that they're not just the immediate inbox of people jamming you for information and response. These things need to be the big picture things. Where are the church? How are they connecting to God? How are they doing in their relationships with one another? Do people feel connected and communicated to? How will I communicate to this group of people that I'm responsible for? Where are the finances in the midst of our organization? Can I continue to employ people for how long when there is only this amount of income? Where can I release resources to feed people, to support people who maybe have lost their jobs? What are the things that I can do to help those around me? Take stock of what you have and make a plan of what you're going to do. We need to understand that the world has gone through multiple crises down through its history, and humanity has a way of surviving. And we will survive. These things come to pass. I'm reminded of that scripture in Isaiah where it talks about though you walk through the river, you will not drown. Though you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. I'm reminded that things pass by, that these crises last for a moment. So remind yourself of the context. The context is that God is in charge of all things. So you need to zoom out and reassure yourself, and then reassure the people that you are responsible for, of the big picture. God has not abandoned us. God knows what's going on. God's in charge of all things. We can place our hope in Him. We are more than conquerors. We have this moment to reach out to God and know Him in a different way, in a new way than ever before. This is your moment to reassure your people and to reassure yourself of the big picture. Understand the context, that this is all part of God's plan. And then zoom in into the current context of your local town and your local people. Understand not just your reality, but the reality that they are facing. You see, right now you may be concerned about the realities of church giving, about the realities of the projects that you've been planning for ages and ages and ages, and now may not happen, and the loss that that might cause to your church, the project that you're in charge of, to the mission that you run. But you need to understand the reality of the people that you're responsible for. They may be facing very difficult times, and if you're not aware of that, then you will come over quite insensitive as you place a demand upon them to be proactive in giving to the church or making sure they attend meetings online. You need to understand the reality of what your people are facing. Zoom in to their context. Know right now the family situation. Some of the people in your church, as they live in lockdown, will be facing some very difficult moments with regards to mental health. Some of those people may be facing difficult moments with regards to peace in their domestic situation, and being locked down is possibly the worst thing that they could ever face. You need to understand the context of your local people, not just the context of your organization, of the church. Zoom out so you can bring hope, peace, and a big picture to those who are in very difficult situations as you zoom in and pastorally get alongside people who are dealing with tough moments. Communicate, communicate, communicate. This is the time when you and I need to find new and innovative ways to connect with people. Of course, previously we did a lot of that face by face, drive out to somebody's house, have a meeting, visitation, all that sort of stuff. And now we're all scrambling to work out these new ways by which to do it. Well, yeah. We are in a new moment where we are having to learn new skills, and that's no bad thing. But I want to encourage you to keep communicating simple, clear messages of love and support that reassure people. So do that through WhatsApp, do that through Facebook, do that through Skype meetings and Zoom meetings. Find all sorts of ways to connect with people. You cannot, at this moment in time, over communicate the big picture that God's in charge. the small picture that you are with them as individuals, standing with them and praying with them, that together as a church we are going to make it. Keep communicating with that sense of assurance that God is with us and God will not abandon us and that He is for us. Keep communicating. Become proactive in setting up WhatsApp groups and commissioning people within your church to connect with other people in your church. This is the moment for high-end communication. Be decisive and flexible. In this current crisis, we need to make decisions in a very fluid manner. Every single day is requiring us to make rapid fire decisions, and not all of those decisions we're going to get right. I'm going to give you permission just to get a whole bunch of things wrong right now, and that's just okay. What's more important than you getting everything right is that you are dependable, that you are consistent, and that you are there for people, and that as you work it through together. But you are going to need to make decisions. Previously to this moment, and previously to any crisis, you can take your time to be working things out. The pros and cons, let's meet together, let's pray about it, let's meet in a week's time, in 2 weeks' time, and we'll come back together. Now may not be the time to operate like that. You just don't have the space or the connectivity to behave in that way. So you now need to make decisions. You need to make decisive decisions in your leadership of church. This may be the moment to make some of those decisions that you've been putting off for a long time, but now it's pressed upon you and you need to make those calls. It's almost as if everything has been shaken and the stuff that isn't essential is going to fall off the tree. So, be decisive. Make decisions. Don't be afraid to take charge. Yes, communicate left and right with your leaders, but make decisions. And be flexible. Recognize that collective wisdom often is better than just your own individual wisdom. So there is a moment to steady yourself, to get some feedback from a couple of people on the end of a Zoom meeting, and be flexible to other approaches and hear that wisdom. But you need to be decisive as well as being flexible, be a listening person, a hearing person, but be ready to change and move the shape. Those things that we thought were essential may not be as essential as we thought in this crisis moment. So, flexibility, holding things loosely, ready to change things if necessary, and ready also to make the tough decisions that need to be made. This moment is drawing people to a place of asking questions that maybe they've not asked for a long time. In your journey of communicating to your church, there are many people that are being pressed face to face with the issues of life and death. And it's not just the reality of those inside your church, but that's true of the entire world right now. There is opportunity, missional opportunity for us to connect with people who are really looking for answers to questions that are right present in their hearts and in their minds. So this is the opportunity to point people towards the answers. One of the things I'd recommend is that it isn't necessarily about you having to produce content that answers all of those questions. There are some amazing resources out there that you can point people towards. This is a great moment for you or for somebody in your team to be researching the resources that are out there that deal with life after death, that deal with suffering and illness, that deal with debt and finance, that deal with social isolation and loneliness, that deal with mental health. This is the moment for you to gather those resources and make them available to everybody else. So let's lead our churches through this crisis.